G'day painters, welcome back to Bellomars Miniatures. In this video I'm painting a Hekaton Land Fortress from the Leagues of Votann. This is a beast of a model that took me ages to paint and I had a whole host of struggles along the way. But it looks great on the table and that's what matters in the end. Anyway, you're not here to listen to me ramble, you're here to see how I tackled this beast, so let's get to it. Intro over. The majority of this model is going to be red, so I undercoated it with Gory Red from Vallejo. This establishes my shadow colour for the reds, and just lets me skip a big step, saving a lot of time. This is the first land fortress for my army, so I'm not totally locked in on the colour scheme. I have a vague idea, but I want to see how it looks on the model, so that means my first step is just to block all the blue in and get an idea of how it looks. I'm using Dark Sky from Army Painter here. I'm just giving everything one quick coat. I'll come back in and do the second coat later to make sure I have that good coverage. Then I break out gunmetal and do the same for the metals. I do end up changing my mind a few times throughout this project and make some changes. So when you see things change colour between steps, it's not magic, it's because I changed my mind. I also did a coat of Dragon Red to start bringing out that mid-tone. It just gives me a more accurate idea of how it's all going to look and helps when I'm making my decisions. I decided I'd focus on the crew first before worrying about the rest of the model, so once the three main colours are blocked in, that's our next step. I start with Dark Sky for the cloth on the driver and I block that in. I do the consoles and the controls as gunmetal. Dragon Red for the armour on the drivers and gunners. For the seat belts, the seat and the driver's leather cap I use leather brown. And then the gloves, knee guards and boots get hit with Necromancer Cloak. Now that most of the colours are blocked in, I go through with the shades. I start with dark tone for the metals and the Necromancer Cloak. Blue tone for all the blues. I'm sure it's a shock, but I use red tone for the reds. And strong tone for the leather parts. Then I put Shinning Silver on the dome heads of the Iyanden. Then it's time for highlights. Since Shinning Silver is already on my palette, I start with that for the metals. Then Ultramarine Blue for the blues. Pure Red for the reds. Then a 50-50 mix of leather brown and Elvish Flesh for the leather. Once the highlights are done, it's time for the final touches for these guys. First I paint the console screens white. For the first Iyanden head I use Iyanden yellow contrast paint over the Shinning Silver. And then the second one gets Talassar blue. And then the screens get a coat of Aethermatic blue. Finally, for the screens I pull out matte black and use this for some symbols on the screens. I water down the black a fair bit. I want it to be flowing off the brush of the tip really nicely. I'm not great at freehand, so any help I can get with making it smoother is really needed. We're finally done with the crew, so it's time to move on to the rest of the model. I left the wheels off when I built the model because I'm lazy, and then I undercoated them black. I believe it was Chaos Black from Games Workshop, but any black will work. Then I use gunmetal to paint the hubcaps and all that detail in there. Then to finish them off, I just hit them with dark tone. Since dark tone's on my palette, I also do the metal on the rest of the model. I apply this pretty heavily to the metal and I'm not being terribly careful. I do end up with some pooling, but I'm not worried about that. The only place this is going to show in the end is in the shadows, and I feel like it reads as soot and dirt and it just brings a bit of character to the model. This is a step I struggled with. I wanted a black to put between the panels and all the rivets just to help things pop a lot. But it was just a struggle to find something that worked the way I wanted and gave the result I was looking for. The first thing I tried was Black Templar contrast, but it didn't like the look, so I tried Dark Tone next and wasn't a fan of that either. They were just both finishing too shiny. Next I tried Black Ink. It was giving the more matte finish that I was looking for, but it just was not flowing well which was just causing some issues. In the end, I came up with a mix of black ink and contrast medium. A rough 50-50 mix seemed to work out. It gave the finish of the black ink that I was looking for, and it flowed reasonably well into the cracks and crevices. It worked out okay, but I feel like there has to be something better to use here. If any of you know a better way to achieve this look, I'd love it if you'd let me know in the comments. Next, it's back onto the metal. I grab gun metal and work around the model to bring the mid-tone back. I only take the gun metal to around halfway down the pipes, leaving the recesses and areas towards the bottom, the darker tone from the shade. Then I move on to plate mail, and once again I work around the model the same as the last step. This time I'm working in smaller areas and focusing towards the top where the light will hit. Then the final highlight for the metal is Shinning Silver. I go around just hitting the tops of the pipes and lights with this. I'm also doing an edge highlight on the lights and the guns. And now I move on to highlighting the blue. I struggled a lot with this. There are a couple of contributing factors to the struggle. The first is glazing large flat areas. It's something I'm not very experienced with to start with. And the second is that I live in South Australia. For those that don't know, it's summer here and it's just a very dry heat. I was painting this on a 40-degree day, that's like 100 Fahrenheit, and I was struggling a lot with the paint. I had to water it down a lot to stop it drying too quickly, but that was leaving me with coffee staining. So I was swinging between paint drying too fast or coffee staining, and it was just a struggle, and the glazing was not working. I was trying to work my way up to Ultramarine Blue with a step of a mix in the middle. I stuck with this for a while, trying to get the glazing to work and fix the coffee staining before deciding I had to change tactics. I ended up deciding to try wet blending instead. I was still risking coffee staining because I was having to use a very watered down mix, but I did get much better results. I'm not totally happy with the finish, but it looks great from tabletop, and that's the main thing we care about here. Once I got the blue to a point I'm content with, I move on to working on the red. I had the same struggles with the red as I had with the blue, but it wasn't as bad since the red just blends together better anyway. I started with a 50-50 mix of Dragon Red and Pure Red. I work around the model, focusing on the raised areas that the light would be hitting. I'm also going down the sides a bit, starting from about a third of the way down, working up my way up towards the top. Then with Pure Red I do the same thing, just working in smaller areas to continue bringing out those highlights. Then finally it's a mix of Pure Red and Lava Orange, only working towards the very top of the model for the brightest spots. After the last layer, I spent some time going back and forth, just glazing to smooth out the blends a bit. I didn't get them totally smooth, but it looks good on the tabletop and doesn't look too bad from up close, so it'll do. To finish out the red, I do an edge highlight of Lava Orange. I do this around all the panels towards the top of the model. I'm currently tossing up about whether I should do the edge highlight on the side panels or not. Let me know in the comments if you think I should do it or if it's better to only do it towards the top. I'd love to hear your opinions. After all our hard work, we're on the home stretch and it's time to work on the final details. I start with blocking in the lights with white. I'm not being too careful on the spotlights, it's going to be way easier to come back later and just fix the metal lines than to worry about trying to avoid them right now. The lights are a good spot to get a splash of colour in onto the model. So for the spotlights I go with an Iyanden yellow contrast. The first set of indicator lights get hit with warp lightning contrast. And the second set with a Magmadroth flame. To finish the model, I go back to Shinning Silver. I work around the model picking out all the rivets. I just love the effect this has and I think it really makes the model pop. Especially with the way we did the black ink earlier, it just makes those rivets pop out and stand out really well. The difference between doing the rivets and not is just huge in my opinion, and it's not a step that you should skip. And it's finished. As you saw, I definitely had some struggles with this model, but I think it came out well, and I learned some things along the way that'll help me in future projects. I have a small 1,000-point tournament coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm pretty keen for this to hit the table. Now I just have to finish the rest of my army in time. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. I hope you've picked up some things for your own hobby projects and you're enjoying my videos. If you have liked the video, subscribe to see more of my videos as they come out. And if you want to drop a like, that would be great. But until next time, see you in my next video.